Wait for them.
This is me, right? Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for coming here for our discussion about the summer reading book. At this time, if you could take out your cell phone and please turn it off. Silence it, whatever you need to do. Thank you. So every year, Duke University attracts students from all over the world, students with differing thoughts, unique experiences, and varied perspectives. On a campus that thrives on diversity, the Duke Summer Reading Book is meant to weave a common thread among such a wide array of students. Each summer reading book is selected not only to be interesting and enlightening, but also to spark an honest and insightful discussion among our newest members of the Duke community.
This year, a committee comprised of students, faculty, and administrators selected State of Wonder by Ann Patchett as the class of 2016's summer reading book. The committee was inspired by its central themes of adventure, self-discovery, and human morality. Even from our brief time back on campus, we are pleased with the discussions it has generated among our peers.
Ann Patchett is here with us today to share the inspiration behind her work. She was born in Los Angeles, California, but grew up in Nashville, Tennessee. She published her first novel, The Patron Saint of Liars, in 1992, and after writing for various magazines, including the New York Times Magazine, the Washington Post, and Vogue. And if you thought that was cool, wait until you hear about 3 interesting facts about Ann Patchett. She has also been a guest on the Colbert Report. She was named by Time Magazine as one of the top 100 influential people in the world. And she, just this morning, was announced by the New York Times that she will be interviewing J.K. Rowling in October for her only U.S. promotion of her upcoming novel. Her breakthrough novel, Bel Canto, was released in 2001, illustrated her motif of using extreme situations which reveal her character's personal transformations.
In State of Wonder, Ann Patchett brings Marina Singh, a pharmaceutical researcher in search of a missing colleague, to the Amazonian jungle, while simultaneously allowing readers to identify raw human emotions of fear, uncertainty, and loss with just the turn of a page. With her beautiful prose and deep symbolism, Ann Patchett recreates a world deep in the heart of the jungle that unexpectedly parallels that world we see outside our dormitory window. And it is now our great pleasure to introduce you to our distinguished guest, Ann Patchett.
Hello. Hi. Lucky you. Oh my gosh, this place is so nice. I mean, really lucky you if you were getting ready to start college anywhere, because this is such an exciting time and it's such a great thing that you're embarking on. But to be able to do it here at Duke, just feel grateful, because this is such a beautiful place and everyone I have met has been so terrific. We never have as much time as we would like to, and what I want to do is just run through a couple of quick things that I want to tell you, and then open it up for questions so we can have a dialogue and I can talk to you about the book and you can tell me what you want to know, and I can answer the questions. First, I want to tell you a little bit about my job and how I became to be a writer. Probably the only really interesting thing about me is that I have always known what I was going to do with my life. If you had met me when I was 5 years old and you had said, "What are you going to be when you grow up?" I would have said this. I would have said that I was going to be writing books, which I think is actually really strange. I think that there are a tiny number of people in the world who know exactly what they want to do with their lives, and then a much smaller number from that group that get to do it. So I feel that I have been incredibly fortunate because I didn't want the other things that people wanted. I never wanted to be rich. I never wanted to own a house. I never wanted to have health insurance. I never wanted to get married. I never wanted to have kids. All I really wanted to do was write. And it meant that life has been very happy and very easy, because I think when you know what you want to do and you know where you're going, everything becomes simplified. It doesn't mean that if you don't know what you want to do with your life right at this particular moment, that life is going to be worse or harder. But that was just the strange thing about me. And going very much on fast forward, when I write a book, I write the book that I want to read. I write a book entirely for myself, which means I don't sell my books before I finish them, which is actually kind of rare, especially at this point in my career. A lot of writers will take a 3-book contract, so you actually get the money in advance and you sort of owe the books to your publisher. I don't ever do that because I want the book when I'm writing it to be mine. While I am writing it, I am the only person who reads it. And a lot of people want my job. A lot of people will say, I really want to be a writer, I really want to be a novelist. And I think a lot of people definitely are smarter than I am. A lot of people definitely are more talented than I am. The thing that I have that a lot of people don't have is I have the ability to sit in a chair for 8 or 10 hours at a stretch. And I have the ability to get no peer reviews or interactions while I'm doing my work. It's a very strange thing when you think about working on something. Sometimes I can write a book. I actually wrote State of Wonder really fast. I wrote State of Wonder in probably about 1.5 years, but a lot of times it takes me 3 years to write a book. So imagine you're only doing one thing, like you're writing a paper, but it's one paper and it takes you 3 years, and in that time no one ever says to you, gosh, good job, I really like what you're doing. You could be going down completely the wrong path and you're not gonna know until the end. And then the weirdest part is, once the book is done, I get all of my performance reviews in the period of 2 or 3 weeks in national newspapers and magazines. That is horrifying. So if my work is really good, then I hear about it all at once, and if people hate it, I hear about it all at once in a newspaper. The way that I make a book up is something like this. I start in many different places. Sometimes I start with a character, sometimes I start with some sort of a conflict, sometimes it's a setting, sometimes it's sort of a moral idea, what if this was happening? Sometimes somebody that I meet very casually will make me think about something, and then I'll start to put an idea for a book together. People ask me all the time if I take notes. I don't take notes because I have no idea what the notes would actually say. It's sort of like this, hello, people in the balcony. It's like being in a snowstorm and squinting at something that's really far away. That's where the novel is. And you think, is that a bird? You're like a mole, you're sort of leaning in. Is that a house? Is that smoke? What is that? I can't see. And every time you're sort of craning around, you're moving closer to something, you're trying to figure out what it is. That's what it's like coming up with an idea for a novel. So I start very slowly to put it together. Interestingly enough, the book that I'm putting together now, which I've not written a word of, really starts with a title. And I know that I want to write a book called A Vast Inheritance. And a couple of years from now, you will go into a bookstore and you will, I promise you, you will see a novel called A Vast Inheritance by Ann Patchett. I don't know why I want to write a book called that, but I squint every day towards the characters, try to figure out their relationships. I know there's a stepbrother and a stepsister. I know someone dies, but I try bit by bit to figure it out. So finally, I get it in my head. And the book that I haven't written, the book that is in my head without a word on paper, let me tell you, is the most beautiful, moving, intellectually challenging book of our century. It is astonishing. It is a perfect, flawless piece of art, this thing in my head. Not written. It is like having a monarch butterfly flying around my head. My best friend, this butterfly. My best friend, this unwritten novel. I don't know if you guys had imaginary friends when you were kids, but it's sort of like that. You know, I'm just in the grocery store and I'm walking around and I'm thinking, man, you guys are buying chicken and I am writing a novel in my head. And it's so satisfying. It's so beautiful. And then there finally comes a day I know everything I need to know about this novel in my head. And then I have to do something so horrible. I have to take this beautiful monarch butterfly out of the air with my hot, sweaty hand, and I grab it, and I crush it, and I kill it. And I put it flat on a piece of paper, and I run a pin through it. And everything that's glittery and gorgeous and full of life comes off on my hand. It's dead, it's dry, it's awful. And that's the book you read, okay? That's true. But now think about this, because we've all had this experience, right? You know the paper you want to write. You have an idea. It is fantastic. You think about this idea. It is perfect. You sit down, you start to write it. You think, this is not a representation of this fantastic thing in my head. This stuff that I'm writing is dreck. And so you say to yourself, I must have writer's block. And you walk away from it because it's terrible. The stuff on the paper is terrible and not in any way representative of the beauty in your mind. Well, guess what? That's the way it is. And if we can understand that and we can forgive ourselves, this is the problem with the microphone, this area from head to hand, that is the death of dreams, okay? And the way that it gets better going from head to hand is practice. We don't think of writing as something that needs to be practiced because we can all speak. We all know how to operate a pencil. We all know how to work our laptops. We all understand language. So, you know, what's the problem? I must just be blocked. You're not blocked. You just have to keep doing it. Just like you were learning to play the cello, you have to do it over and over again until you make a clear passageway from head to hand to get that story out. And that's the thing I'm good at, because that's the thing I do over and over again. I actually believe that there are all sorts of things in college you don't need to know. I think that there are wonderful, interesting classes that you can have a happy life without ever taking. But if you don't know how to write, I'm not going to say which ones. That's up to you to decide. If you don't know how to write, if you don't know how to decide what it is you want, what it is you know, and clearly express it, life is going to be so much harder. So, sometimes I sit around thinking up a book for 2 years. Sometimes it takes that long. And when I wrote my first novel, I got the idea in my head. I was a waitress. After I went to graduate school, I became a college professor, and then I got a job as a waitress at a TGI Fridays in Nashville. And I wore a funny hat and I served fajitas. And while I was doing that, I was making up a novel in my head. And I did this for a long time. When the novel was perfect and ready to be killed and put onto paper, I went off to write the book. I went to Provincetown, Massachusetts, the last city in America, and I got to about page 20, and I realized it was the worst idea for a novel in human history. It was absolutely terrible, and I was throwing my life away. You might have had this experience as well. So you spend a long time thinking up an idea for a paper. You put a lot of work into it, you start to write it, you realize it is a horrible idea, you need to throw it out and get a new idea. And this is really a problem, because what you discover later on is that every new idea eventually becomes the old idea. So you can wind up having 20 starts to 20 different papers or 20 starts to 20 different novels. I made a really important decision when I was writing that first book, which was I decided that I could never run off with a new idea until I had completed the old idea. Again, going fast forward, I write a bunch of books, and every single time I write a book, this happens. Every single time I spend all this time making up a book, I get everything perfect, I start to write it, it breaks my heart, it's terrible, I hate it, I have a really great new idea, but I stick with the old dead idea until I have finished it. Okay, so I always get an idea for my new book while I'm in the middle of my old book. This is the big challenge. When I was writing a book called Run, which was the novel that came out before State of Wonder, I actually broke my own rule for the first time, because while I was writing Run, my best friend died. And I decided to write a book about her, and I needed to do it right away, so I wrote this book called Truth and Beauty. So I stopped the novel I was writing, and then I went back to it. And then after that, I have a friend who needed a ghostwriter for her book, and I stopped writing my novel again, and I ghostwrote her book, and then I edited an anthology. And anyway, basically, I wrote 3 books while I was trying to finish this novel. And when I finished this novel, I didn't have an idea for a novel. Now we're at State of Wonder. So this was really a problem. When you're a novelist and you don't have an idea for a novel, it's a little bit like being single and not wanting to be single. And what that means is that every time somebody walks into the room and you know you're not interested in that person at all, but this little voice goes, but you're single and you don't want to be single. So you have to at least give them a chance, hear them out. And what it means is you have an enormous number of unspeakably boring conversations with people you're not interested in because you're looking for an idea. So when I was looking for an idea for State of Wonder, when I was looking for an idea for my next novel, I started thinking about these programs. This thing I'm doing right now, I actually do this a lot. And I've done it with every single one of my books at all sorts of different colleges. And the reason, I think, is because I went to Catholic girls' school for 12 years. So even though I don't mean to write books in which people do not swear and nobody really has sex, I keep writing those books. And because I keep writing those books, I keep being invited to college campuses and being picked, because mine tends to be the book that parents don't really object to. Anyway, so when I do these programs, at the end, what always happens is I meet with the selection committee that brought me here, and the selection committee all over the country always says the same thing to me. They say, next year, we would like to invite an American female author to come to campus who has written a novel with strong female lead characters, and we would like those women in this book to not be falling in love or being victimized by men. Can you recommend that book? No, I can't. Isn't that weird? I can never think of that book. And after so many people saying that to me, I started to think, I want to write that book, because this is the book I want to read. This is the book that's missing. I mean, I'm not falling in love. My friends aren't falling in love. We're not being victimized. We're, in fact, really smart women who are going out and trying to do some sort of good in the world. Why am I not seeing characters, heroines, who reflect the kind of women that I am, that my friends are? Okay, so I know now I've got an idea. I want to write a book with 2 strong female lead characters. Okay. So what's their relationship? This is the way the mind works when you're in the grocery store and you're a novelist. Okay, so what's the relationship between these 2 women? I decide I'm going to write a book about a teacher and a student. You know, people say to me all the time, oh, you've written a book about female fertility. For me, and I don't know, can be something else for you, for me, this is not a book about a fertility drug. This is a book about a teacher and a student finding each other again. I am sure that you have had this experience in high school. You will really have it in college. There are teachers that you meet who will absolutely shape your life. Or more importantly, you will shape yourself because there are qualities in that teacher that you admire. It's not as if you are trying to be like that person, but you admire them so much, you want to be someone who would please that person. I had that experience very powerfully when I was in college. There were teachers that I had, two in particular, who completely changed my life. The interesting thing was they didn't know me. The reason that they didn't know me is I was a really good student, and I was quiet, and I got my homework done on time, and I did exactly what was asked of me, and those aren't the students you remember. I hate to break this to you, because I've had this experience also as a teacher. When you're a teacher, year after year after year, you wind up having thousands of students, and the only ones you really remember are the horrible ones, are the ones you hate. I could give an entire talk about a kid named Tony Monta, who was a student of mine at Allegheny College a million years ago. I hated this kid so much. I wanted to hit him. I don't think I've ever wanted to hit anybody except my sister in my entire life. But he's the one I remember, not the really fantastic, terrific, smart, good kids who were in that same class, because he made my life miserable. Anyway, so a little aside about Tony Monta. So now I know, teacher and a student, they haven't seen each other in a long time. The teacher completely changes the student's life, and the student knows everything about the teacher, but the teacher knows nothing about the student. That's the setup for the book. So, okay, now what are they going to do for a living? They're going to be doctors. That seems very clear. My husband is a doctor. My stepfather was a doctor. I know a lot of doctors, got a lot of doctor stories. That was very easy for me to tap into. Dr. Swenson was a really easy character for me to write, because everyone who is a doctor has these crazy doctor stories. Being a doctor is a little bit like going through the military or getting hazed for a really horrible fraternity, in that they will just make you do things for the sake of making you do things and for no other real reason. So I could get Dr. Swenson so easily. Okay, so then I know I've got the teacher and the student. I know I've got two women. Now, I know that one of them's gone missing because they have to find each other again, and I know I really want to write about malaria. I'm very interested in malaria. I'm going to make a detour here. I really hope that I can bring myself back to malaria as I go off. Let me backtrack a little more. I was a really rotten student when I was a kid. Basically, it's amazing that I'm not still in third grade. My parents moved around a lot. I didn't learn how to read until really late. I was a DF failing student probably through about 4th or 5th grade. I was kept in at recess for 3 years. By the time I graduated from high school, I was a really good student, but I was scared. And when I went to college, I was a really good student, but I was really scared. And what that meant was I only took the classes that I know I would do well in, okay? So I was a great writer. I was great at the humanities, great in English, just absolutely stellar. I knew I would knock it out of the park. I knew I was bad at math. I tried to avoid those classes whenever possible. I played to my strengths. This is idiocy. What you have right now, and my father told me this all the time, and I never listened to him. What you have right now is this opportunity to grow and to expand your mind, and you can't do it unless you're willing to take some risks, and unless you're willing to step outside of your comfort zone and do something. Take a class that doesn't make any sense for you, because what the process of an education is to learn how to learn, so that when you get out of school, you can teach yourself things. So now, coming back to malaria, all of a sudden I'm writing all of these books about things that I know nothing about, because you know they always say you should write what you know. That's really good advice if what you know is interesting. What I know was not interesting. I went to Catholic school for 12 years. I was good. I knew nothing. But I could expand the world that I was writing about by going into all of these things that I didn't know. But because I had done such a rotten job with my own education, even though I had graduated from college with straight A's, I really failed myself in a lot of ways by not taking classes that I wasn't comfortable with. So all of a sudden, I want to write a book about malaria. I've got to start from scratch. I've really got to go back and teach myself all of the science. I called the head malarialist at the Bethesda Naval Hospital. I could give a 45-minute lecture about mosquitoes that you can't believe. It's great, but for another time. Okay, so I'm writing this book, and I know that I have a character who is developing a drug that is going to be so unbelievably profitable for the American pharmaceutical companies that the American pharmaceutical company really won't care where this person has gone to. They're just going to pour money into her research. So then I have to think about this profitable drug. Do you see how far down the line in thinking fertility comes? So I've got student teacher, malaria. I go to the CDC and I look at the website to find out where there's malaria, where in all of these different places there is malaria. Could there also be a profitable drug being developed? And I decide that it's going to be in Brazil because everybody thinks there's some sort of medical magic going on in the Amazon. And then I think, what would the profitable drug be? Okay, I think effortless weight loss. That's my first idea. I think eternal youth, and then the really great idea that I had, fantastic hair. And then I decided to go for everlasting female fertility because I think that seems really possible. What you want is something that seems like it could almost be true. I went and talked to people at Eli Lilly, and I went to talk to people at Pfizer Pharmaceutical, and so even though this is all made up and it's crazy, I kind of got enough of the lingo to make it slightly believable. So now I've got malaria, I've got a profitable drug, and bit by bit I put all of the players into their spots. Okay, there's so many other things I want to tell you, but I really want to go in to get some questions too. So let's take a few questions and then I'm going to keep going on with the story because, of course, I'm not entirely sure you're going to get up and ask questions. I've heard two things about you guys. I've heard that you had a lot of questions about this book, and I've also heard that you're a very quiet and polite group. People have been saying, the class of 2016, they're so nice. Okay, now, do you guys want to come and ask the question in the microphone, or do you want to just shout it out? I can hear you, and I can repeat it back, too. Thank you for having me.
I was really morally challenged by the book, especially when it came to the situation with Easter.
Yeah.
And how he was given back to his home tribe.
Okay, now I'm going to just repeat that part. So she's saying she's morally challenged by the book because of Easter and how he was given back to his home tribe. Okay. Okay, now, you're saying Dr. Swenson's moral conflict between the idea of keeping him and the idea of giving him back. But Dr. Swenson didn't give him back.
Right. At the end, she was really upset, though. She said he was mine.
Right, Dr. Swenson was really upset. So you want to know kind of where I was coming from with the whole thing with Easter and giving him back. Okay, a little backstory about Easter. I don't have children. And I write a lot about children. And to be really honest, children, by which I mean little people, make me really nervous. I would be good in a nursery school for about 20 minutes. You could put me in an old folks' home, in an Alzheimer's unit, I could be there all day long. Kids make me nervous. When I was in high school, I was the most popular babysitter in my neighborhood, and I got tons of money. I didn't like the kids. I don't think the kids particularly liked me, but I would clean people's houses and make them food and do their laundry. I mean, I was booked up for years in advance. Anyway, So when I was writing Easter, I meant Easter in a way to be kind of a joke. And because I thought, well, what would the perfect child be? They wouldn't speak. Oh, I know this is really horrifying, but stay with me here. Okay. And they would intuit my desires, and this child would be a tiny servant. Okay? Now, I know it's horrifying, but let me tell you what's even more horrifying. Every place I go, people are like, oh, Easter, Easter, I loved him more than anyone in the world. You've got to write a sequel and tell me what happens to Easter because and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you people are just like me. Because the child that you're relating to is a movie screen, is the screen on which we project our own desire. And that's Easter. He serves, he comforts, he intuits, he meets our needs before we even know that we have them. And people respond passionately to this kid. Now, when I started writing the book, and the way I work, I really do know how the book is going to end before I start. But I didn't really know that Easter was going to be given back at the end. I had a very interesting experience when I was on book tour for Run. I was speaking one night at the National Cathedral in Washington, and a woman came up to me in the signing line, and she said she was an interpreter for the deaf. And she said, I really want to see a book that has a deaf character in it in which nobody talks about the fact that the character is deaf. Nobody cares. Everybody's over it. He's deaf. We accept this. That's not what the book is about. So I said, that's a great idea. I will definitely put that person in my next book. So Easter's deaf, and so much of this story is about what Morena has to give up. You know, she loses her luggage, and then she loses her luggage a second time. She loses the cell phone. She loses her medication. Actually, she throws it away. Again and again and again, she keeps giving things up. She actually loses physically the clothes off her body. And every time she loses her sense of herself and who she is, she finds a deeper part of herself. Morena is going on a very kind of Buddhist journey to find who she really is. And she has to keep giving things up and giving things up and giving things up. And then at the end, the thing that she never thought possible that she would have to give up would be Easter. It's very interesting as a novelist to create conflict and to create sort of things that readers will have to grapple with. Because on one hand, Easter is being returned to his parents, right? But because everybody responds to Easter with a sense of ownership and possession, he's mine. We know that Anders wanted to bring him back to Minnesota. We know that Morena wants to bring him back. This is her own son. We know Dr. Swenson feels the same way. He's mine, he's mine. They have a great sense of ownership about him because they have no idea who he is, because he is a reflection of the characters. So at the end, when he gets returned to his parents, you know, it's kind of the first people who see him as himself. And his mother begins to sob, and we're horrified as readers. We think Anders and Morena are terrible for letting him go. It's incredibly painful, and the reason it's painful is we've projected on Easter as well. And we think, no, I want a happy life for him. But maybe a happy life for him would be being with his parents. I'm not saying in any way what's right or wrong. I don't know. But I like the idea of making people have to think about these things and wrestle with them. I don't know if that's a satisfying answer. People really want to know what happens to this kid. People say to me all the time, did he make a canoe? Did he come back? A book should end at the point at which you have enough information to take the story forward yourself. If you want Easter to come back, he comes back. There was another question. Yes. Hi. Oh, yeah. He's asking about where the inspiration came from for Morena and the whole conflict with her father and the mistakes that she's made and kind of where I got that character. The thing with her father being from India was important, again, because of malaria. So I wanted to have a character who had had an experience with larium. A lot of people ask me if larium is a real drug, and it is. If you get larium, one of the listed side effects is psychosis, terrible dreams, and possible suicide. And it's very interesting. I read a report recently that said that they're thinking now that part of the reason why there has been such a high rate of suicide in the troops in Afghanistan and Iraq has to do with the fact that they all take larium. It doesn't make everybody crazy, but it does make a lot of people crazy. So I wanted her to have that childhood experience without understanding it, so her father needed to be someplace where there was malaria. This is the way these things kind of work. As far as the cesarean and her early mistake, I wanted to have it be that, again, the relationship between the teacher and the student, the feeling that you're disappointing your teacher, but also what Morena really failed to do in that first surgery is she failed to make a break from her teacher. She didn't do the right thing kind of as a grown-up, as a responsible person, as a doctor. She continued to behave as a student, which means she didn't go forth with the surgery when she knew that she should have, because she was trying to still conform to the rules that her teacher had established. In all education, there is a point where we have to break, and we have to learn, we have to accept things, we have to gather everything we can from someplace else, someone else, but at some point we have to take responsibility for ourselves and our own actions, and that was Morena's failure. Also, I think that for all of us, certain things that we do, mistakes that we make, really shape us and haunt us and set us forth in our life. That is one of the very best things about where you are right now this week. No one here knows you. And if you messed up and you did something really stupid in 8th grade, no one knows. You get to reinvent yourself this week. This is one of the very few chances in your life. And that's what Morena does. She leaves the program, she leaves gynecology and obstetrician, she leaves her husband. She basically erases everything in her life, anyone who might know this, and then she starts over again. And then the book really is about her journey of having to start over again and again and again. So I wanted a character who was smart and who's just kind of keeping her head down and doing what's expected of her, but she's pushed off a cliff. This is a classic technique in novel writing. Take a character in a good, safe life and push them off a cliff into the ocean and see how well they swim. Yes, gosh.
Wait, sorry, I have a microphone for you.
Hi.
Hi.
Why did you title the book State of Wonder?
Why did I title the book State of Wonder? Because I didn't have another title. Sometimes, and this is probably why I'm going to write a book called A Vast Inheritance. Now I get the title first. Sometimes you've got great titles, sometimes you have no titles at all. I had no title at all for this book. I really wanted to call it Orpheus in the Jungle, but the problem with that title is that anybody who understands the Orpheus myth, it kind of gives the whole plot away, so I couldn't do that. I came up with 70 different titles. This book was finished, it was going to press, it had no title, or I should say more accurately, it had 10 titles every day. And then finally I decided to call it Book of Wonder. And I gave it to a friend of mine, and she was reading it, and she said, I really liked it, but why did you call it Book of Wonder? And I said, because Morena exists at every moment in a state of wonder. She cannot believe what she's seeing. She can't even comprehend the world around her. She's jaw-dropped. She is in a state of wonder, and also sort of in a state of a dream the whole time. And my friend said, well, then why don't you call it State of Wonder? And I said, wow, that would really be a better idea, wouldn't it? So that's how I got there. And now, if the microphone, there are a whole group of questions. There's a clump of questions. Oh, there's a clump of questions over there. Why do I even bother talking? I should just answer questions. It's so much more fun. So let's have some question here, and then we'll go over here. And you people in the middle, you can just totally check out. That's fine. Okay, who's got it?
Hi.
Hi.
So you said you wanted to write a book with a strong female lead, and I was wondering to what extent you thought you were successful with Marina. In particular, like noting that she's not really the person who makes the decision to give Easter away. And I think there's some frustration with that.
That she's not the person who makes the decision to give Easter away?
Yeah, I mean, Anders kind of just throws him overboard.
You know, though, I completely believe Anders. I completely believe Anders is right. They can kill us and keep him, or they can keep him. And that seems very clear, and to me, a no-brainer. That's not the hill you want to die on. I do think that Marina is very strong in that she continually finds more and more of herself, and she's capable of doing things that she never thought she was capable of. But I'll tell you who's really strong is Dr. Swenson. And when I wrote this book, I got a lot of reviews that called Dr. Swenson a villain, which is so funny to me because I love Dr. Swenson. And to me, she is someone who absolutely knows what she wants, what she needs to do, and she gets the job done. People are kind of horrified because she's taking blood samples from a tribe of people who might not understand it. But what she is trying to do is come up with a vaccine for malaria that could save potentially 800,000 lives every year, and she's not going to let anything get in her way. And she makes a decision about what's right and what's wrong, and she takes full responsibility for it. Dr. Swenson is a little bit like the Catholic Church, in that what I loved about Catholicism when I was growing up was you didn't have to agree with it, but they had an answer for every single question you could come up with. You could like it, you could dislike it, but they were never wishy-washy, and that's Dr. Swenson. How are things over here? Yes?
Hello.
Hi.
So while I was reading your book, I noticed a lot of differences between State of Wonder and Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. I was wondering if you were inspired by this book or any other book while you were writing this?
I'm really glad you asked that question. It was whether or not I was inspired by Heart of Darkness. I am a compost heap, and this is the way that works. I read things, I see films, I listen to music, I travel, I see the world, I make friends, I have conversation, I forget. Everything piles on top, it rots, it mulches, the worms eat it, and through that a little plant grows up. And it takes the nutrients from all of those different things in my life. When I was writing this book, and I had a wonderful opportunity last night to discuss this point with your president, who is fantastic. I hope you get to know him. And we started talking about Henry James and the Henry James novel, The Ambassadors. This novel was, for me, inspired by The Ambassadors. For those of you who have read The Ambassadors, that would probably make no sense whatsoever. But The Ambassadors and Heart of Darkness have the same basic structural outline, which is this. Character A goes missing. Character B is sent to find character A. Character B finds character A and discovers character A is happier where he is. So that's the structure of Heart of Darkness. When I was halfway through writing State of Wonder, I suddenly thought people are going to think that this is like Heart of Darkness. They're not really going to think Heart of Darkness. They're going to think Apocalypse Now, because there's that strong imagery with the river. I read Heart of Darkness when I was in high school. There are all sorts of things that figure into this book, though. A wonderful Evelyn Waugh novel called Handful of Dust had a huge impact on this book. More than anything, the films of Werner Herzog Fitzcarraldo and Aguirre, The Wrath of God, I just robbed them blind. And Pinocchio. Anybody ever read Pinocchio? Like the real Pinocchio, the Italian Pinocchio? It's really fantastic. The story in Pinocchio is that Pinocchio wants to be a boy forever, and he wants to not go to school and not do any work, and he wants to play pool and eat candy and hang out with his friends, and Pinocchio turns into an ass. And that, to my mind, is the whole thing about Dr. Swenson developing a drug for everlasting fertility for women. Because we want to put our choices off. You guys are so young, you're not going to have any idea what I'm talking about. But childhood keeps getting extended, and this notion that we can put off having our children later and later, it's really great, but at some point it gets to be too much. And so this is a cautionary tale. So yes, Heart of Darkness, The Ambassadors, Handful of Dust, Pinocchio, films of Werner Herzog, and a trip I took to the Amazon. Okay. Yes, right in the middle. You can shout out, we're so close.
So I remember when they were going into the Amazon, like they were actually on the base when Easter was driving, that Dr. Swenson made a comment about the fact that she thought it was ridiculous that people going into indigenous areas assumed that they were going to forever change the area that they were in and ruin the culture there.
Right.
And I thought that was interesting because in the end, Easter ends up leaving them and returning to the tribe, and it's almost like the pharmaceutical impact in that area starts to disappear at that point. It's like Easter's life, who had previously been completely different, is now going back to what it was, and everything's going to be different.
Right.
Did you ever think about that? Like, is that consistent, or was that just kind of...
Okay, let me see if I can paraphrase you here. So when they're on the boat, when Dr. Swenson and Marina and Easter are on the boat and they're first making their trip into the jungle, and Dr. Swenson is talking about the impact of modern culture on indigenous people, and then, in fact, there's a non-realization on the part of Dr. Swenson at the end that she has, in fact, impacted her environment by taking Easter. Yeah, and in fact, we all do what suits us. You know, we all think that the little bit of disruption that we cause is okay, but then we will judge someone else's larger disruption. Does that make sense? And so it's never clear. You know, it's not like any character gets off scot-free. How many of you have read The Great Gatsby? Most? Yeah, okay, all of you. Good. I love that book. It's a fantastic book. I have a really good friend who's a very, very smart, successful novelist who said when she read State of Wonder, and she's the only person who said this, but it's so interesting to me, she said Morena and Anders were the villains of the book because they were like Tom and Daisy Buchanan. And they just went in blithely and messed up everybody else's life and then left without ever taking any responsibility for it. And I think that's a really interesting way to read the book. Another thing that was interesting, originally, you will remember when Morena goes into the jungle to get Anders, and she has a basket of wraps with her, right? She's got the mushrooms. When I originally wrote this book, she first gives them the oranges, then she gives them the basket of wraps, and then she gives them Easter, because novelists always like to do things in threes. And I have another friend who's a novelist, Miley Malloy, and she read the book for me, and she said, you cannot give the basket of wraps to the Hamaka tribe. Anybody know why? Yes. Yes. Yes, they would kill the Lakashi, because that's been made very clear. If anybody knows about the wraps are really the big secret, not the bark, not the fertility. If anybody knew about the wraps, the Lakashi would be decimated, killed. Plus all the doctors there, everyone would be killed. And I said to Miley, I understand that, but she's trying to keep Easter. And so she gives them the wraps. She's trying to keep Easter, she's trying to get Anders, and Miley said that is absolutely unacceptable. You can't end the book with my knowing that at some point, be it a week, a month, 6 months down the line, that every single character in the book is going to be killed. And it's not going to be in the book. She was like, I will never have anything to do with you again if you do that to these people. And so I had her keep the basket of mushrooms. Isn't that weird? So, these are just a set of ethical decisions. Another thing that I did, changing my mind at the very end, originally Dr. Nkomo goes with her on that trip. You remember Dr. Nkomo comes down to the pier and he wants to go and then she goes off without him. Originally when I wrote that, Dr. Nkomo went with her and he was killed. He got shot with an arrow. And when I wrote that scene, it felt so wrong because I thought, how can I write a book about a woman who's doing all of this to save the husband of another woman, and yet we know Dr. Nkomo is married, and I just let him get shot, and we won't care because we get Anders back? That seemed really, really wrong. So I actually rolled the film back 10 pages, brought Dr. Nkomo back to life, put him back on the dock, and then took the boat off again. So, yes? Jack Bovender, who's sitting right in front of you, actually. Yes? Yes and no, but let me tell you, because this is a great story. So I've got the book all set in my head, and I'm getting ready to start. And it's November, and I start writing the book in January. I am on the board of my Nashville Public Library. Can I ask you guys a question? Is there anybody here from Nashville? A couple? Come say hello to me after, because I'm really curious. People keep saying to me, are there any Nashville people here? And I really want to know. Okay, so for years, people have asked me to donate as a charitable auction item the idea that you could buy your way into my novel, that it would be raffled off and I would name a character after you in the novel. And I decided to do it one time for the public library, and so there's a big gala and a silent auction, and this is the item. And what was really funny is I have known Jack and Barbara Bovender for a long time. And there was another couple there that night, Steve and Judy Turner, and I've also known them for a long time. And they were bidding against each other. And for the first time, I realized that Jack and Barbara Bovender had the most beautiful names of anyone I'd ever known. And it's so funny the way a name can be. If you've known somebody for a long time, you forget, you don't notice their name. Barbara Bovender. Barbara Bovender, it's the most beautiful name in the whole world. I could sing it. I walked around for weeks saying Barbara Bovender. But at the same time, my very close friends, Steve and Judy Turner, are bidding, and I'm thinking, Steve and Judy Turner, those are terrible names. Those are just the dullest names in the world. I could have Steve and Judy Turner. I could have Jack and Barbara Bovender. So I keep going over to Jack saying, more, pay more, win. And they did win, and I was very relieved. And it was the inspiration of the beauty of the name. So even though I hadn't planned to have these characters in the book, I suddenly thought, I have these beautiful names to work with, and I really want there to be these great characters, Jack and Barbara Bovender, in the book. And so I made them Australians. And when I was finished with the book and I was doing my fact-checking, I called the only Australian in Nashville who I knew, Nicole Kidman, and which I think that's kind of cool. And I called Nicole Kidman and I said, I need good Australian surfer lingo. Get me some information. And she called some Australian surfer friends and called me back, and she gave me, some tips. One of which struck me as so dirty that I couldn't put it in the book. Anyway. Yes. Okay, so you could have a microphone. If it's complex, have a microphone.
Good idea.
I'm afraid now.
No,
Go
it's
easy on me.
Not super
Okay.
bad. So the jungle kind of serves as these individualized journeys for each of the characters, Dr. Swenson, Anders, and Morena, is how you pronounce it? I said Morena.
Yes,
in the book.
Morena.
Morena. But kind of I guess in the middle part of the book, Dr. Swenson says her biggest mistake was letting everyone know that she was a doctor by kind of sewing up that girl who got her head cut.
Right.
And Moreno's was rather confused because she, like, her natural instinct was to, to save that patient, to, help them.
Right.
And you said that gradually Marina loses things but finds her inner self. And
Yes.
Dr. Swenson is there already, but I don't know, I just feel like maybe that Dr. Swenson kind of lost herself being in the jungle, just because she wants to keep it Easter. Does that make sense? And you said she knows what she wants and she knows what to do, but by sewing up that girl and by wanting to keep Easter, she kind of doesn't follow through with that. And kind of Marina at the end,
Yeah.
giving up Easter, that completely is against what she said just a couple chapters before that and wanting to sew up the girl. So it's a little bit sad, but
Yeah, I love that, though. That's really fantastic.
Yeah.
But I also think there is, for all of us, for better or for worse, a division between our professional life, our intellectual life, and our personal life. So, what we want to do intellectually, what we want to do to change the world, and then what
Right.
we feel emotionally might not be completely lined up.
Yeah.
But
So
go ahead.
so would you say that Marina keeping the mushrooms but giving up Easter, was that like professional versus emotional? Like, I feel like she's emotionally attached, but so then she chose like professional instinct over emotional in that moment, or?
Honestly, I think that Morena did the only thing she could have done.
Okay.
I mean, she could have kept Easter and have been killed, in which case she doesn't get to keep him.
Right.
So she really is at a point of not having a choice. But I think that wasn't a professional decision for Morena. It was really, she had her back up against the wall. And I have a feeling that I have to stop talking now. One more question. Oh, I don't even know. Somebody pick for me. You, pick for me.
You did the wobble really well.
Oh, the balcony. Poor balcony. Hi, balcony. Yes.
We have two team questions.
Okay.
Okay, first one, something I was curious about. So when Miranda goes and rescues Anders and everything, they have sex before they go back.
Right. What is the motivation? Okay, the question is, Morena and Anders have sex, what's the motivation? This is,
I was just curious because there's so much made about Karen Anders.
yeah, right. So much about Karen. This is a really interesting question, and I'm glad you asked, because this is, where are you from? You're from Philadelphia. You are not fitting into my demographic. I have found this to be incredibly regional, in that Southerners seem extremely upset that Morena and Anders have sex. And Northerners and Westerners, it makes perfect sense. And I don't know exactly what that's about. I live in Nashville. People have given me a really hard time about this in Nashville. It's very immoral. They shouldn't have done this. I was with you until that point, and then they shouldn't have done this. To my way of thinking, there are things that you do sometimes when you think all is lost. She thinks that her friend is dead. She loses Easter. She thinks she's going to be killed. It is an act of solace and comfort, and it happens one time, and there you go. These things in life will not happen to any of you, but to the rest of us, sometimes they happen. And some people can say, yeah, I really get that. That makes sense. And then other people say, no, it's offensive and it's upsetting. But now, this is very important, actually, in terms of how you survive in English classes, because everybody is allowed to have opinions, but, we have to back our opinions up with the text. So, we know that they have sex And what 80% of the people who read this book don't get is that she is pregnant. Now, we know this from the text, and if I had more time, I would make one of you tell me this, because I know you know, because the Lakashi women are repulsed by the bark from the moment of conception. So Morena, who is addicted to the bark, and is going to take home a suitcase full of twigs so she can keep gnawing on them at home, wakes up the next morning and thinks, ooh, bark, no, I don't want any bark. So she doesn't know she's pregnant. I love doing this. I love giving the reader something that the characters themselves don't understand. So from that, you have to extrapolate out what's going to happen to Morena. Is she going to stay there? I think not. She's not going to tell Anders. She's not going to mess up his life. She's going to wind up going. Now, you have two parts of your team question. What's the second part?
Okay, this is going to seem really shallow.
Go for it.
Okay.
Let's end on a shallow note.
Me and I were having a really hard time visualizing how she ate the bark. Like,
Oh, yeah.
how did you,
Okay. So the shallow question from the balcony is she has a really hard time visualizing how she ate the bark. This is how I want you to remember me. Okay? Something like that. You've been great. Oh, wait. I want to tell you one more thing before you go, and this is really important. This is a tip that I always like to tell college students, how you can increase your grades. In every class, this is not a joke. And you're at Duke, you're obviously really smart kids, you probably already know this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. This is as somebody who was a college teacher for a long time. Sit in the front. Keep your eyes open. On your teacher's eyes, do not ever text. When your teacher says something, if you don't have anything to say, smile, nod, interact with them physically. If you have a question, raise your hand and ask the question. You are the teacher's friend if you do those things. And it will make a big difference because your teacher will like you more if you interact with them. And I mean just physically leaning towards them, acknowledging them. If they make a point, go like this, feel it. It makes a huge difference to how your teacher will feel about you, and you will do better in school. Have a wonderful time. You lucky people. Thank you.